Ba-boom. VikesNow, Dustin Baker on a solo trip. It is February 2nd. We are, 6 weeks from free agency, 85 days from the NFL draft. So what I want to do is chat with you folks about the Vikings offseason needs. They are plentiful. I think when you lose at home in the postseason to the Giants, you have to do an introspection and figure out, all right, where do we need to get better? Because they should have won that football game with just average defense. Should have gone on, probably lose to the 49ers, but at least you have the warm fuzzies of winning one playoff game in the head coach's first year. But no, the defense was thoroughly exposed. So we have an offseason of change afoot with a new defensive coordinator who should be named in the next couple days. I think it's a three-horse race between Ejiro Evero, however you say it, Brian Flores, and Sean Desai. Mike Pettin is in there theoretically, but they probably would have hired him by now if he was the dude. And Evero might be ixnayed from the race because it was announced just before I pressed record here that Vic Fangio is indeed going to the Dolphins, not the Broncos, and Evero is probably the second best candidate to be on Sean Payton's staff. But this is not Broncos now. This is Vikes now. And I want to go through the 6 offseason needs by position. And I'm going to start at the number 6, so it's the least important of the 6, and work my way up to the grand finale, which is the most urgent need. And I've discussed these in bits and pieces with you guys for, about 3 weeks now. So some of it's review, but I want to give more insight and context as to why I feel the way that I do per position. So the first one is outside linebacker or edge rusher. Here's the deal. If Minnesota believes that Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith will be back, that's probably fine for 2023, especially with the new defensive coordinator. Whoever that guy is will likely salivate that he has Danielle Hunter and hopefully the good version of Zadarius Smith at his disposal. So on paper right now, they're both under contract for 2023. I know Hunter's contract is kind of an insult. It's the last part of the team friendliness that he signed on for with Rick Spielman. So I'm going to guess there's some contract hubbub with him this offseason. But if it is resolved and Zadarius comes back on his own team-friendly deal, the edge rusher spot, although getting up there in age, is not in bad shape. And edge rushers can usually go pretty strong into their 30s, unlike, running backs or whatnot. So I have it at number 6 because there is the possibility that they cut ties with Darius Smith because he ended the regular season on a whimper. He only had a half sack after the Bills game for the rest of the season. He started off like the defensive player of the year for the first, 9 games. And then I don't know if he got hurt and just played through it, but he wasn't the same. So in theory, between Hunter's contract and Zadarius Smith's quiet nature of closing out the 2022 season, there is a way that one or both would not be back, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah sculpts the roster in his liking with new edge rushers. But if one of them goes, or if both of them go, you have an emergent need and absolute urgent need at edge rusher because you cannot contend for a Super Bowl with just half-ass guys on the edges of the defensive line. So I have this one at number 6. Again, the Vikings haven't drafted an edge rusher in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft since Erasmus James in 2005. So assuming that it's not a rubber stamp that Hunter and Smith are back just like that, this is why it's a need. If those guys are back, then you got Patrick Jones, DJ Wanham as the complements, and that's fine. But I guess I'm cynical enough to believe that it's not going to go off completely swimmingly, that the edge department will be back in Hunter and Smith. So that's number 6. Number 5 is interior defensive line. And I have this on the list this low because the Vikings always seem to figure it out at the interior defensive line spot. And I'm specifically talking about Jonathan Bullard's spot or Sheldon Richardson, old spot, or the one Shamar Stephen filled over and over. I'm fine with Harrison Phillips being the nose tackle in the 3-4, and then Dalvin Tomlinson's right there next to him. But I'm talking about the other spot, the one that we coveted all summer and the first month of the regular season for Ndamukong Suh. For some reason, whether it's the Zimmer Vikings or the O'Connell Vikings, they're always content plopping a guy in there saying, all right, Jonathan Bullard's just fine. Shamar Stephen doing a bang-up job. They should look to get supremacy at that spot. So like Daron Payne is a free agent, or that Brian Breesy dude who probably won't fall to number 23 in the draft, but if he does, you get him. They should get the advantage of having an interior pass rush like the Rams did with Aaron Donald. I know the guy won't be as good as Aaron Donald, but I'm sick of them just saying, oh, yeah, it's cool. We got Everson Griffin, Neil Hunter will be fine, or we've got Zarius Smith and Neil Hunter will be fine. I think they should invest in a impact maker on the inside of the defensive line and not just some guy who stuffs the run. I'm talking about a pass rusher on the inside of the defense. And Pro Football Focus, I think Sam Munson actually lifted this one up as the Vikings' biggest offseason need. So, there's a little something to it. But once and for all, Sheldon Richardson was pretty decent when he was here those 2 seasons, 2018, 2021. But I'm talking about a guy with a reputation who is known for rushing the passer on the inside of the defensive line. Otherwise, it is just redoing it again with Bullard or Asese from the Gophers or one of those guys. I would like somebody who does something, gets 10 sacks on the inside. So that's number 5, interior defensive line. The next one is very familiar in your DNA, is interior offensive line. Kevin O'Connell's team has this very unique, new for the Viking situation where the corners of the offensive line are fine and dandy. Christian Darrisaw, who I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show. Christian Darrisaw is going to join the show this offseason. I spoke with him yesterday and trying to figure out if it'll be in a couple days or a couple weeks or a couple months. But yes, Darrisaw will be on this show chatting with me about the 2023 Vikings. But on the franchise cornerstone tackles, you have Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. So that's set. O'Neill is, making more money than God at right tackle. Darrisaw will follow suit in 2 years or so. So you've got the hard part figured out. But the inside, while it improved and wasn't Dakota Dozier-ish in 2022, it really wasn't fantastic. And that's why, Kirk Cousins led the league in quarterback hits. I think he was hit 84 times, and that by leaps and bounds was the most in the NFL. Somehow he is Tony Stark and never gets hurt. But we're not sure if Garrett Bradbury will be back. He had a reclamation year where he basically wasn't horrible. And then Ed Ingram was meh, but that's how rookies go sometime. And then Ezra Cleveland was solid, but his contract will be up at the end of next year, and I'm not sure that the Vikings will want to give him a fat-ass deal when you could just draft the next left guard who played just as well as Ezra Cleveland. Regardless, for the 2023 season, you've got Darrisaw here, Brian O'Neill there. The 3 guys on the inside have to be pretty good. Then you'd find a tunnel to a good offensive line. In 2022, the offensive line was decent. It wasn't absolutely horrendous like we've seen in the previous 7 years. So it was like cause for celebration. Then, all right, it's not ranked 27th in the NFL anymore. But now, with an offense-first head coach, you should look to improve. Whether that's finding Bradbury's replacement at center or bringing him back for, what would that be, year number 5, and then hoping that Ingram takes the jump, and then Cleveland should be set there. But I'm operating under the pretense that it's not a foregone conclusion Bradbury will be back, so they need to get better in the middle of the offensive line and not rest on the laurels of, we got Darrisaw and O'Neill, will be okay. Get good, get greedy, make those trenches like the Eagles. That's why they're getting to the Super Bowls, because both sets of trenches, offense and defense, are fantastic. And that's what the Vikings should look to steal and emulate. So that's number 3, interior offensive line. Excuse me, that was number 4. Number 3 on the list is off-ball linebacker. Say it with me. The Vikings linebackers Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks were both aged 30 in 2022, and it showed. They were not very fast. Kendricks is not the dude that he was at the peak of his powers in 2019 especially. 2018 was pretty good, and 2020 was pretty good. But 2019, he was a demigod. Those days are over, and he can be released for a very small dead cap hit, and I think it frees up about $10 million. So I expect Kendricks to be gone. And then Hicks, thanks for the 1 year. I don't think he'll be back. So that means you need 2 off-ball linebackers in this new defensive system, whoever is the guy leading it. And one of them is probably Brian Asamoah. And the other one, you'd probably want to get like a established off-ball linebacker like Tremaine Edmonds in free agency. I think ultimately it just has to get faster, and that really is my only requirement, is that they're not slow, because it was telling against the Giants and various other teams that this team defense wasn't very fast. I love Kendricks, and hate to see him go, but it probably is time based on the way his contract is structured, and Hicks was just kind of decent in 2022. So off-ball linebacker is a humongous need if you want to improve, and whoever the new guy is should look to get more swift in the middle of the field. So whether that's simply promoting Asamoah, signing a free agent, or drafting Trenton Simpson like Josh Fry has talked about ad nauseum on this show. So get better at off-ball linebacker, younger, leaner, meaner, less expensive for however long the rookie deals will last, where they come from in the draft. Number 2 is WR2. Yes, you can get excited because the Vikings should be in the market for a wide receiver who is Jefferson light on the opposite side of the field. Unbeknownst to me, and I think everybody, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks, I guess CJ Ham, you can't even really tell because he hardly played. They all kind of slowed down in the same season, which means they hit a proverbial wall in the same 4 months. And I didn't see that coming. Usually when that happens to a team, it's staggered. But at WR2, the way that Justin Jefferson has established himself as the best receiver in football, teams are going to use him as the focal point for their defensive game plan. They're going to bracket cover him, double cover him, and, he's going to be the guy that they look to, like the Belichick. You take their best playmaker out of the offense and then figure out the rest on the fly. I think those games where Jefferson experienced quiet games and double coverage, I think those are going to be more prevalent. So, in addition to having Hawkinson in the middle of the field, who you swung a fancy trade for at the deadline, you need a guy who used to be what Thielen was in 2018 or 2019. Guaranteed production, so that in those games where Cousins or whoever the next guy is can't get the ball to Jefferson, well, we'll just throw it to player X, because if Justin Jefferson is a 10, then this guy is an 8, and he can make plays and tabulate the yards. And Vikings fans are used to having 2 dazzling wide receivers. We did it from kind of depends on when you perceive Thielen's rise to power, from 2016 until 2019 with Thielen and Diggs, who were just like identical at the time for production. And then in 2020 and 2021 with Thielen and Jefferson. We need that back because I'm not sure KJ Osborne is that guy to be WR2. If he is, great. If Keenan McCardle says so, I'll trust it. But if he is not, and I don't expect Thielen to be with the team, I think Osborne is best slated for WR3, and I think Thielen is just too expensive to be back as a WR2. I do expect the Vikings to explore in free agency or the draft a WR2 to complement Jefferson, because it's really, really needed. As Jefferson's popularity increases, as his production increases, the guy is getting MVP consideration. He's going to be the guy that they attempt to neutralize. And when that does happen, because if you put enough people on him, he'll be neutralized, then you need some homie who's just chilling that you can throw to as a WR2, and that guy can feast. So I think number 2, the second most important offseason need, is a WR2 that takes the heat off the Vikings offense when Jefferson is neutralized. And number 1, I've talked about this already on the show, but I'm going to lift it up again, is cornerback. There are 5 guys that could reasonably start at cornerback if the Vikings had a game tomorrow. And that's Patrick Peterson, who's a free agent, Duke Shelley, who's a free agent, Andrew Booth, who's healing from his injury, Caleb Evans, who had 2 concussions, and Cameron Dantzler, who became an utter footnote down the stretch of the season. That's 5 maybes of individuals who might be able to start as CB1 in 2023. Is Patrick Peterson going to be back? He says he is, but then you'll look at various rumor websites that says he ain't coming back. Duke Shelley was phenomenal, was a season saver for the Vikings, but you have to operate under the pretense as a general manager, I think, say, oh, he probably had some Case Keenum to him where it was a really, really good couple months. And is this really sustainable? Because do you really want to go into 2023 with Duke Shelley as the starter and then he gets torched the first 2 games and you're like, how did we not see this coming? The guy was just outperforming everything. That was his magnum opus. And then he goes back to being an ordinary cornerback. Now, I don't think that will happen. I think Shelley is legitimate and good to go as a starting cornerback, but there's risk because you just don't know if that was lightning in a bottle. And then Booth and Evans are going to be the same concept. They're both coming off injury-riddled rookie seasons. We hope they develop into long-term starters, but when you go into a season with presumed Super Bowl all-in stakes, you can't have 5 serviceable cornerbacks that you hope will play well. You need one guy to lock it down, and then the rest of those guys can be depth and like, oh, sweet. We have this 5-time Pro Bowl cornerback that we got via trade or free agency. And then also we have Patrick Peterson, Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, Cameron Dantzler, and Duke Shelley as phenomenal depth. But if you just go at it with 5 guys who are all going to compete for 2 jobs, yes, the best 2-man will win, but will they be good enough to compete in a pass-happy NFL? So, therefore, I think no matter by any means necessary, Adolfo-Mensah has to get a cornerback that you can say, all right, we got this guy. And I don't know if that's Jalen Ramsey because he's expensive as hell, but you have to, deputize one guy as, the king of the cornerback room, and then the rest of the dudes are, developing in Booth and Evans case, and then you hope Shelley is still that guy. Thankfully, this draft is very deep for cornerback, and free agent market doesn't look too horrible either. But with the free agent market, and the names, we'll get into that a lot this offseason because we still, again, have 6 weeks, and we'll get into all that. So, in summary, from least important on the list to most important, but they're all important, is edge rusher, interior defensive line, interior offensive line, off-ball linebacker, got to get faster, WR2, and cornerback. Because it would be criminal to go into a season with the guys that we have now, knowing what we know happened against the Giants. You've got to get better at cornerback. All right, I'll be back tomorrow or Monday, I'm not sure yet, and we will chat about the next offseason topic. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I will get details on when Darisaw will join. Skol, baby.